Okay, today is Monday, March 9th, 2020. We're working on our final review of using formulas and nets to calculate the surface area of 4 different types of prisms. So here we have 4 questions. We have a cube, a rectangular prism, we have a triangular prism, and we have a cylinder. And in here in the middle here, we have a 10, a 1, a 0, and a 1. Um, in one of my classes, I asked them to guess which of those 4 prisms has the greatest surface area, and the majority of people in class guessed the cube. A whole lot abstained because they weren't sure, but I guessed the triangular prism. That was me, but we'll see. So as we go through these questions, make sure you focus on the exact way that I solved it, because my expectation is that you will do it identically to the way I solve it. So the first question gives you a cube, and it gives you the formula 6 side squared. Remember, the coefficient of 6 is there because if we think about this as a net, there are 6 faces. So if I draw the net, if I broke down this cube into its net, there would be 6 squares that make up the 2-dimensional rendering of the 3-dimensional shape. So the reason why the coefficient of 6 there is that there are 6 faces, and each of those faces is a square, so therefore side squared. So when I substitute my information, when I take my formula and substitute my 12, that is exactly what you need to write, 6 multiplied by 12 squared. That's only substituting the side length for 12, and then you're going to simplify it by using BEDMAS. And remember, BEDMAS would be brackets. There are no brackets there. That's just a 12 separating it to show multiplication. There's the E, there's the DM, and there's the AS. E stands for exponents, so 12 squared is not 24, but 144. And when I simplify that, I'm going to end up with 6 times 84, or 144, which is, I can't remember. What is it, 864? Is that right? So on your test, you actually receive a point for putting the proper formula. You actually receive a point for substituting properly and simplifying properly and getting the right answer. And then at the very end, make sure you put the proper units, because if you don't, you will lose a half a point. Okay? Now going back to the net part, each of those faces has a length and width of 12 by 12. So simply on your, oh, that's not what I want. Simply on your net, you tell me that each of these faces is 144. And that is sufficient for me to understand that you, A, can draw a net, and B, know what the area of each of those faces is. Okay? So for cubes, it's pretty easy. It's the easiest of them all. It's the shortest of formulas. It's the shortest of simplifications, and it's the easiest of nets to draw. Everybody should not have any problem whatsoever with doing all of that work for a cube. The rectangular prism, however, is a slightly more complicated shape, but not too much more difficult that you can't do it. If I break it down into a net, no, I should put that up top. Hang on one second. Put that here, and put that here, and put that here. We're going to call this one the bottom, and we're going to call this one the top. We're going to call this one the front. We're going to call this one the back. We're going to call this one the left, and this one the right. And really, on your net, it doesn't matter what you choose. It's okay, whatever you choose, as long as you identify all of the different faces that make up a rectangular prism, because when you do so, it's going to be much easier for you to put the areas in. If I think about the bottom, and if I was to trace it with red, the bottom would be those 2 red lines that make up that rectangle on the bottom. So the bottom is going to be a 20 by 4 rectangle. And since 20 times 4 is 80, the area of the bottom will be 80, and the area of the top will also be 80. When I think about the front is going to be a 20 by 3 rectangle. A 20 by 3 is 60, so we're going to put a 60 in for the front, and its matching face will be the back, which is 60. And finally, the left and the right. If we think about the left being a 3 by 4, or the right, excuse me, being a 3 by 4, then each of those rectangles would be 12. And that's all you need to do for your net. When we take the same formula and substitute it in, Since I know the top already is 20 by 4, I have two of those shapes that are 20 in length and 4 in width. So when I substitute the TB, or the top bottom, I have two 20 by 4s. I have two, excuse me, that's not an L, that's a 20. 20 by 3s. And I have two 4 by 3s, just like I did when I made my net. So the first thing you're going to do is write all of that in. So you write your formula for 1 point. You substitute all of that information without using multiplication symbols for your second point. And then you simplify the multiplications next, which would be 160 and 120 and 24. That's just doing the M in your bed mass. And then add them all together. You get 280, 304 centimeters squared as your surface area. In your triangular prism, we'll start with the formula this time first. We'll do the formula first, and then we'll come back and do the net. The formula has base times height divided by 2, and that's the area of a triangle. And the reason why there's a coefficient of 2 here is because there are two triangles, one that makes up the top face and one that makes up the bottom face. So when I substitute the base and the height of the triangle, what I can really do is think of this as being just the triangle face itself with nothing else. If I gave you this question in grade 7, it says, what's the area? You would have said, well, it's 12 times 5 divided by 2. So I'm going to put the base is 12, the height is 5, divided by 2. There's two of those. And there's three rectangles. The first rectangle is this front one that I can see, and that is a 20 by 12. So I'm going to put length of 20, width of 12. And then there's this back rectangle here that I can't see, but it's a 20 by 10. And then there's this other back rectangle here, which I can't see, but it's a 20 by 6. Okay? So if I take my highlighter, that's one triangle. If I multiply it by 2, I get the top and bottom. That's one rectangle. That's a different rectangle. And that's a different rectangle. So now that I have all of my substitution done properly, I'm going to simplify it using bed mass. So I have 2 multiplied by 60 divided by 2, which is 30, plus 20 times 12, plus 20 times 10, plus 20 times 6. And when I have just those multiplications and additions, I'm going to simplify the multiplications. And now that I have just additions left, if I add all those together, I get 300, 500, 600, 620 centimeters squared as my total surface area. Now, alternatively, you also need to be able to take this three-dimensional prism and break it down into a net. And since we already know there's 5 faces, there will be 3 triangles, or 3 rectangles, and there will be 2 triangles. And I'm drawing this terribly, but that's okay. We'll just draw it like this. I know there's no 90-degree angles in there, but whatever. So when I put in the area of the triangles, I know that it's 12 times 5 divided by 2, and 12 times 5 is 60, and divided by 2 would mean that each triangle has an area of 30. And if I think about where that applies in my formula, that's why this is here, 2 30s, right? Because there's a triangle on the left and a triangle on the right, both of which are 30. Then I have that front rectangle, which was 20 by 12, which was 240. Ooh, that's not the proper marker. 240. Then I have my 20 by 6, which is 120. And then I have my 20 by 10, which is 200. And if I added those all together, I will still get the same answer of 620 centimeters squared. So historically speaking, on a test, people write the formula, but somehow go from here right to here. Or some of them even go right to here. But you have to have this step shown. Okay, this is called, the yellow highlighted part is called the substitution. When you take your formula and you substitute the variables for numbers, that yellow step is your substitution step. The green parts are your simplification, using bed mass to solve. And finally, your last answer, 620 centimeters squared, is simply your answer that you've arrived at from using bed mass. And your last question gives you a cylinder, and it tells you the formula is 2 pi r squared because, of course, pi r squared is the area of a circle, and the coefficient of 2 is used because there is a top and bottom circle. So when I substitute my information, I will have 2 multiplied by 3.14 multiplied by the radius. Now, since the diameter is listed as 20, the radius will be half of 20, which is 10. So when I simplify all of my information into my formula, that is what I would get. Now remember, bed mass is B-E-D-M-A-S. There's 4 steps. The first step is brackets, which we don't have any. Some people say, well, that's a bracket right here, that's a bracket right there. Well, true, they are kind of brackets or parentheses, but when you look inside there, there is nothing to solve. 3.14 is just a number. There's nothing inside the brackets to solve. So they are just there to show multiplication, actually. Your second step is exponents, which we do have right here. So the first thing I'm going to simplify is that exponent of 2. So I'm going to keep 2, 3.14, and 10 squared is 100. So when I simplify all that up, I've just finished the E of my bed mass. And now when I look at my next step, I have division, multiplication in the order they appear from left to right. I do have multiplication. So I'm going to solve all of the multiplication before I do my addition. So 2 times 3.14 times 100 is 628. And the reason why I can do that is I doubled 3.14 to get 6.28. And when you multiply it by 100, you move your decimal 2 places over, so 628. The next one I'm not so good at. I should be able to, but I'm not good. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted my calculator, which is right there. So when I do my calculations, I want 3.14 multiplied by 20 multiplied by 2 or multiplied by 40. Keep it simple. Is 125.6. And when I add those two together, add that to my 628, I get a final answer of 753.6 centimeters squared. So just to refresh your memory, 1 point for writing your formula, which you will not have, you'll have to know it. 1 point for simplifying that, or sorry, substituting that. 1 point for simplifying it, and 1 point for getting your answer and using the proper units. When you do your net, remember there are 3 faces: the top circle, the rectangle, and the bottom circle. The top circle would be pi r squared, which is 3.14 multiplied by 10 squared, or 314. So the two 314s are that 628. And remember that the formula for this side here is pi dh, and the reason why it's pi dh is because this circumference and this length are the same thing. And since circumference is pi times diameter, that is why the pi d is a part of our formula. And this width right here is really the height of our cylinder. So the reason why we have this here is because it is the height. So pi dh would be 3.14 multiplied by the diameter multiplied by the height, which we already know is going to give us, because we just worked it out, 125.6. And when you add all those together, you'll end up with the final answer of 753.6.